In our last video, we talked about how to retouch images in Photoshop. We talked a little bit about RAW files, Adobe Camera Raw, and a lot of the functionality that's contained within that. In this video, we're going to kind of take those elements and get a little deeper and talk about restoring an image. So retouching an image is when you kind of take an image and bring it to develop it into its full potential. What you saw in your brain whenever you took it or whenever you saw that image originally. By the way, you don't have to be a photographer to use all of these same techniques. You can do these with any camera or any image. You can still open up into Adobe Camera Raw, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But restoring an image is taking an image that's maybe seen some damaging times and it's not in its best shape and fixing it up using your Photoshop tools and techniques that you already know and love. So here we have, actually, but before we do that, I did want to cover that other element that I was talking about. Let's drag and drop an image into Photoshop real quick. If you have an image that has not been edited, like this one where it has no Adobe Camera Raw experience, or let's say we just had something in Photoshop and wanted to edit it with Camera Raw, you can come up to the filter menu and click on Camera Raw Filter, and that will pull up the same thing that we saw earlier. So I can now edit this in order to get it to look exactly how I wanted to. I neglected to mention that in our first video, but I'm talking about it here so that everybody can kind of get that. So yeah, lots of good stuff that you can do using Adobe Camera Raw, whether it's you editing a RAW file or you editing an image that isn't a RAW file, but you want to apply these sort of raw adjustments to it. Yeah, so let's close this out and we'll go back to retouching. Say OK, don't save, and we are going to take this photo and drag it in here. Okay, so here we have an image. This is the image we're going to be fixing. You can obviously tell that some of this image has seen better days. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the image, hit Control-J, just to duplicate it. Always a good idea to duplicate your background layer because you normally want to leave your original background layer intact. What I first want to do is I am going to hit Control-T, and we're going to transform this to get it how I want it to be. All right, I just want to kind of fill up the space that we've got here. Get rid of that border. And then maybe crop it a bit at the bottom. Actually, because this looks like a bad scan, what we'll probably do is zoom in, hold Command or Control, and resize it there just to straighten that out. It still looks like it's not perfectly straight, so we'll straighten it out a bit more and then crop out the part that we don't need. And I'm not going to delete the cropped pixels. That way they are still there. And we'll crop it out from the side a little bit as well. Okay. By the way, sometimes you have to zoom way in order to see what you're doing. There we go. We'll zoom back out. So this picture I know was probably originally black and white, so I'm going to add a black and white filter to it. If I thought this picture was brighter, I could use curves just to brighten it up. It looks like it probably was in certain parts. Then what I would probably do is use a levels adjustment in this one. And when you pull up your levels or curves, that weird thing that you see behind everything, that's called your histogram. It tells you about the brightness values of the actual image you're dealing with. And we're just going to tinker with that a little bit until we get this picture looking kind of what we think it's supposed to. And I'm going to brighten this up a little bit too. Hit Control or Command I to invert the mask after I've brightened it. Now if I paint white with my brush, what it's going to do is it's going to brighten it only in the parts where I'm painting white on. You could also do this with the dodge or the burn tool there. So let's see what I've already done. Very quickly, we've untransformed this image. We've made this back to its original black and white. And then we have also brightened it up a little bit and brought back some of the tonal quality to the image as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to layer 1, zoom in so we can really see what we're dealing with. Before I did anything too crazy, what I would probably do would be to come up to filter and go down to dust and scratches. This is how you restore images. If you ever have a scanned image or anything like that, dust and scratches filter is good to get rid of the little hairs or things like that can accumulate on your image. You might not have noticed too much of a change there, but if I turn this on and off, you really can see what it got rid of. I didn't really have to change those settings much. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J again. You can see I'm starting to get a bunch of layers stacked on top of each other. But once again, already, this is looking drastically better. We'll zoom back in, and then we're going to start. I would start probably with the spot healing brush and just very quickly paint over the parts of the image that are not exactly working the way I want them to. When you go over parts that have an edge, sometimes it may or may not work. Sometimes you have to zoom back out to kind of see if something actually is a rip or a tear or not. And if your spot healing brush doesn't get it perfectly, that's okay, because we know that we've got some beefier tools down the line that we can utilize if we need to. I'm just moving around, painting over what I don't want. I just want my brush size to be slightly bigger than the area that I'm wanting to fix. We paint over what we don't like, and hopefully, if we're lucky, Photoshop should fix it automatically. Let's watch this. I'm going to paint over this long rip. I'm not going to go over his face because that's where it'll start to mess up. Oh, it did a pretty good job. Paint over that a little bit. Got rid of it too. Let's try this part on his face. Paint over what you don't like. Let Photoshop see what it can do. It almost got it. Let's go over the edge a little bit and see what happens. Yeah, see, that's why you got to be careful when you're going over the edge, but that's okay because we're going to go back and we're going to fix this later on. Zoom back out. We should be able to get this with spot healing. Let's see, and we're just painting over the part of the image that we don't like. Okay, pretty good job so far. Once again, let's just toggle on and off the original image so we can kind of tell what we did. It's been just a few minutes and we've already got quite a bit of that done. Let's upgrade our tool a little bit. Let's switch from the spot healing brush. Let's go to our friend the patch tool. Patch tool gives you a little bit more precise ability. So I think patch tool is good for things that are on the edges. So side of his face there, aka or his neck. Circle what you don't like, drag it to a spot that you do like, and it did a pretty good job. There we go, that's looking better. Always a good idea to zoom way in so you can kind of see what you're dealing with. Circle what you don't like, drag it to a spot that you do like, and it should do a better job. Let's see about this guy. Circle what you don't like. It's not going to be perfect the first time, but that's okay. Drag it to a spot that's better, and let go. Like I said, wasn't going to be perfect, but it gave us a good starting point. Okay. So we're getting places with this image. All we've done is we've adjusted the tonal variations of it, made it back to its original black and white, and then we've just used our spot healing brush and our patch tool in order to fix up some of this image. Let's try spot healing brush on this part right here. All I'm doing with the patch tool, circling what I don't like, drag it to a spot that I do like, and then it will fill it automatically. Okay, this part, circle what I don't like, drag it to what I do like. That's where it's going to start to be kind of tough. Okay, let's undo that because I don't even like how that looks. Let's upgrade our tool again. Now let's switch over to our friend the clone stamp tool. Zoom in a little bit. We hold Alt, click on what we like, and then we can just paint over what we don't like. And of course, it looks like it's going to be color. That's because the layer where it's cloning from is colorful, but this one that we're using actually is not. Okay, hold Alt or Option, click on what you do like, paint over what you don't like, and it goes away. Of course, you have to kind of continually keep changing what you're clone stamping from. Let's zoom back out. You can kind of tell. Looks like he's got a little bit of a divot in his face accidentally there. Hold Alt, let go, paint over what you don't like, and then you're good. Same thing here. Move in on his face a little bit. Hold Alt so you can copy. Alt, click, paint over. Alt, click, paint. And where it overlaps things like this is where it gets to be very tough. Alt, click, and then you can paint over what you don't like. Alt, click, paint. But what I would probably do in a situation such as this, where we've got a mouth like that, I would select part of it, duplicate it. I just held Command or Control and hit J to duplicate it, and then we're gonna flip it. Then I can move it to the other part of the image there, add a mask, and fade that in with a black brush. Now it might need, yeah, it looks like I need to transform this a little bit. And when I did that, I need to brush that back in. But that's actually pretty darn close. You can tell that we're getting there pretty close with this picture. I'm going to go back to this layer. I'm going to go back to our clone stamp tool, and we can just start to kind of get rid of some of the parts over here. I think I'm going to try, let's see what this does. I'm going to try the patch tool on this part. And if we're up close, that looks weird. But I wonder if we zoom out, I actually think that looks pretty good. If I thought it needed to look a little bit darker, I would switch to the burn tool, knock down the exposure, and just paint over it a couple times just to darken that part of the image back up. Let's zoom out. Yeah, I'm actually pretty okay with that. This part of his nose looks weird to me. Sometimes when you're restoring an image, you have to take some creative license on your own because you can't tell what it originally might have looked like. But we have already fixed this drastically. For all of these, I would probably just start clone stamping in order to get rid of a lot of this stuff. I'm just holding Alt, clicking, painting over what I don't like, and that normally fixes it up. Alt, click, paint over what you don't like. Alt, click, paint over what you don't like. And eventually you'll have it all done. For large parts, we probably could use the patch tool. Let's see. But yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job so far. Let's look at our original again, compare it to this. This was our original, and in about 10 minutes, we've restored this image using our retouching or restoring tools. If we wanted to give it that original tint that it had, we could do that too. We'd put this at the top. I think this one looks better in its original black and white. I would encourage you to take the adequate time to get your image as close to perfect as you can get it. Make sure you're on an actual layer when you're trying to use your clone stamp tool, otherwise it'll give you the same message it gave me. That said, I don't want you guys to have to sit through me fixing up this image. If you have access to a scanner or any old pictures, I highly encourage you to use your own family's images to retouch or restore for this project. That would be an awesome Mother's Day gift for a mom in your life. If you found some old pictures that maybe had some damage or a rip or a tear in them and you wanted to fix them up, this would be a great opportunity to do that for a project, no less. So this is, the project for this week is restoring an image. For your lab work, you're going to be retouching a RAW photo. If you don't have a camera that shoots in RAW, which by the way, iPhones and most modern day Android devices will do that for you. You just have to enable it. If you don't have that, I have a folder full of RAW files that are available for you to download. This one I would also say it has a little bit of a vignette on it, which I think is accidental. So what I'm going to do is curves layer, invert it by hitting Command or Control I. Bring up a white brush, we'll knock the opacity of my brush down, and then I can paint in a little bit more darkness onto the corners of the image to remove that vignette. You could remove a vignette in Camera Raw if you wanted to as well. Let's see what that looks like. On and off. That looks better to me. I would maybe say this whole general image could be a little bit brighter. But yeah, for the most part, what we've got there in that short amount of time was really good. We used curves and levels to level out the histogram. We used a black and white adjustment layer in order to get this image back to its original black and white. And then we used some of our same tools that we had talked about: spot healing brush, patch tool. Red eye tool is pretty simple and easy, guys. I don't ever see pictures anymore that have red eye in them, but you just use that tool and then click and drag over the part of the image that has red eye, but that's not a thing that exists anymore. Oh, we should talk about ContentAware before we close out this week. Let's open up an image. Let's see. We'll close out that guy. Probably should have saved him, but that's okay. All right, let's go back to one of these raw files of Denton. Okay. We had already done all the editing on this, but I've erased it since then. But you remember that we can use all of our cool tricks, tips, techniques to get our picture edited how we want it to using the Camera Raw dialog box. But one of the newer things that's in Photoshop that I think is one of the best features is the new ContentAware Fill dialog box. And it used to be just under Fill, and you could select ContentAware. But let's say that I had this, and I wanted to get rid of the TWU towers in the background here. All that you do is you get a selection. I'm just clicking and dragging to get a selection. And then you come up to Edit, and you go down to ContentAware Fill. If you don't have ContentAware Fill under the Edit menu, you need to upgrade or update your Photoshop to 2019. You get two things here. You get this picture on the left, which has a bunch of green space over it, and then you get this on the right, which is what it's telling you it's going to make. So the green part is what Photoshop calls the sampling area. That is what it's pulling from when it's trying to decide how to fill in the content that you have over there. And it's filled mine with sky predominantly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the sky from the sampling area just by using this tool right over here. And then you can tell that it did a much better job at filling in that area. It's a little bit too samey when it looks a little bit repetitive. So what I would probably do would be to select the patch tool, select a good chunk of it. Oh, it's in its own layer. I'm going to merge that layer down. Select the patch tool, drag it to a spot that had a little bit more differentiation in it. If that wasn't perfect, I could try ContentAware Fill again. ContentAware Fill is just a good way for you guys to remove sections of your image. Very useful, very helpful, depending on what you're trying to do. It allows you to, like if I zoomed in here, if I wanted to get rid of this post right there, let's try this. Get a nice tight selection. And get rid of the car too. Edit, ContentAware Fill. Oh, it did a pretty good job. It was just right there. Let's see what happens if we remove that. Yeah, and you can see how it immediately adjusts what it's filling it with whenever I click and drag. But if I want to add to it, I can just change that too. We're just going to hit cancel. ContentAware Fill, very useful thing in Photoshop for getting rid of or removing unwanted or unnecessary items. All right, that is it for this week on retouching and restoring